Welcome to Power Lunch Live. It's great to be here with you on Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning, wherever you are, in some places, I suppose. But this is Power Lunch Live. Welcome. The point of the show is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world, people that we can learn from so that we can get better at what we do, whatever that is. And I think that's especially important in the times that we're in now. The fun part about the show is that it's interactive. The way that happens is if you ask your questions. So we do monitor the LinkedIn feed. We monitor the Facebook feed where we're also broadcasting, YouTube, Twitter, and probably something else out there. I would imagine. I think we're on a couple different platforms. And we'll monitor those feeds. If you have questions, please do ask so that we can get to the answers that you need to do what you need to do to get better. Now, today we're gonna have a lot of fun. I've got Dr. Sylvia Lafair. She is a business leadership expert and president of Creative Energy Options, CEO, a global consulting company focused on redefining leadership, optimizing workplace relationships, and conflict resolution. She's a clinical psychologist and is the author of Don't Bring It to Work, Breaking Family Patterns that limit our success. Dr. Lafair, welcome.
Thank you. Delightful to be here.
Well, it is delightful to have you. And I hope you're staying safe, all sequestered away. Are you guys, where are you sheltering in place?
Yeah, we're in Northern California in wine country, and it's wonderful. But we have been locked down here for feels like years. One of the first places, and we're still here, not going anywhere.
I hear you. I mean, it's certainly interesting times. How has you think the pandemic changed leadership? I know that's a big question, but I can't put my finger on it, but I think that we as leaders are going to have to change, or we have changed. And I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think we're learning a lot of things about uncertainty and how to live with it and how to really understand the people we work with. The world is one thing, but the people we work with, or we've had to furlough, et cetera. I think we're learning about different ways of looking at stress. It's a powerful time, powerful. I've never seen anything like it. I assume you haven't either, unless you tell me something else.
No. I mean, we all go through stresses in our businesses, right? I mean, that's pretty common, and we deal with uncertainty to a certain extent. In fact, we try to minimize. In my business career, I try to minimize uncertainty, but I think that's really hard today, don't you think?
Oh, I think it's impossible, because as I follow the news and as I look at where we're headed, I'm usually pretty good at seeing next steps. I really can't right now of where we're going. I mean, I don't believe we're going to go back to business as usual. I think it's going to be business as unusual. And I think we all have to make different decisions now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, I've been on the phone. I have a bunch of these calls every week, and then I do a couple other extra things that are not live, but are with business leaders. And the consensus, I mean, it's actually astonishing. Is they're not going to go back to having crowded offices and a bunch of office space and a bunch of. Many of them have said this has been one of our most productive times ever, and people have done it from home, and they're completely rethinking their whole structure, their whole how they work. I had one guy say, I've been talking about this for 10 years and nobody ever, and I'm the CEO and nobody's listened to me. I've been trying to move the organization this way forever, and it took this to make that happen. So I think that's fascinating. How has this changed you? Have you changed at all in the way you look at the world, or the way you look at leadership? Or
Well, I've always been a good listener, but I think I'm a better listener. I'm really listening, and I'm listening for tonality at a deeper level, and I'm listening underneath, and I'm listening to the silences, Rhett. It's, I mean, we're all doing Zoom calls or what we're doing right here.
Right.
And the theme of our company has been from the beginning that we're all connected and no one wins unless we all do. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of reteaching that to people in a different way because, it's, somebody used to say, you used to sneeze and somebody would say, God bless you. Now you sneeze and they say, get the heck out of here.
That's it. I mean, it's interesting you were said listening, and you brought that up because I think, and I hadn't planned to ask you about that, but I think that's fascinating because that is something you really have to. And you said you were listening to the silences, and to the other. Is that something that you can talk about a little bit and how to do that better? Because I think a lot of times we're busy talking, and I think being a good listener is sometimes an acquired skill, and I think it's ever more important right now to really be able to shut up as a leader and listen to your people, but also listening to who's not talking, and everything else. Are there some things or some tips maybe you could give us on that?
Well, I think number one is we have to figure out first, before we listen, to the kinds of questions we ask. And most leaders now know open-ended questions, no yes and no questions. I'm really focused more right now on tonality and the pause in between. And I'm asking people to pause when they talk a little bit and think. That's where the silence is, because I think there's a tremendous amount of fear. The companies I work with, there's been a lot of furloughing, a lot of downsizing, a lot of, are we going to make it after this? And it's in those moments, if we can be quiet, it's really a kind of taking a breath and giving people room to gather their thoughts differently. We are at home now. And so we don't have all the noise, the craziness of driving to the office and coming home. And, kids are learning to be different even at home. So I'm always saying, just wait a minute, hold. What I say to people is hold that thought. And I'm literally teaching us to take 2 or 3 seconds, take a deep breath, and then respond. It's not the way we've been working. We're fast. We're a fast culture and a fast world, and everything has had to slow down.
Yeah, I guess that I see where that's really, really important. Is what are how do we deal with empathy? I guess because I think with all that fear that you're talking about and all that uncertainty, particularly in our teams and our people, as they realize, businesses may be struggling, and they realize that financially they could be in a lot of trouble, or the business could be in a lot of trouble. How do you deal with that as a leader with people? I know, and we're talking. Everybody says, "Oh, you've got to be honest and you got to be direct with everybody," but I think it goes beyond that too, doesn't it?
Well, listen, as leaders, we're always seen as mom or dad on some level. The minute we sit in that leadership chair, I don't care what our name is, in somebody's mind back there, they're thinking they have to have the way out. They have to have the answers. I don't have them, but you're the leader. You have to have them. So there is a place, I think we're working with a different level of vulnerability, but I don't think we want to see leaders sitting there crying or screaming. Oh my God, I don't know but we didn't want that from our parents either, did we? We wanted to be able to have them say, do what you need to do, and I'll take care of what you're not able to do. And so the confidence that we have to have is with leaders who learn how to deal with the daily stressors and still stay steady. So when they talk, tonality is so important. And you can say to somebody, how are you? And you go, fine. What the heck does that mean? But it's what does it really mean when you're talking to somebody? So leaders have to do their own. This is a time, I believe, that inner work is more important than ever before.
What do you mean by that?
Well, listen, my background is a psychologist and a clinical psychologist and a therapist. And I spent years working with couples and families and individuals who wanted to have a better life. I mean, they'd come to me when they were in a terrible place. And and then I made, and may I tell the very quick story about how I got, this is kind of interesting how I got into working in the work world. So one evening we were doing a program. We were in suburban Philadelphia, and we did a program for parents whose adolescent kids were driving them crazy, and the room was packed. And at the end of the meeting, a man walked over to me. I thought he was going to say something about one of his children. I didn't know him. And he said, will you come work with my senior leadership team? Which was like such an off the wall thing for what we had just been. I said, why? He said, they're fighting. I said, so what? He said, but Sylvia, you work with people who have to get along. It was about families. They have to get along. So I thought about it, and I thought, there's shared interests through genetics, family, and then there's shared interests through economics, the workplace. And they're two of the most powerful forces on the planet. So I thought, I always like an adventure. So I said, sure, I'll come in and see what I can do. So off I go, trotting into a fairly large company with a senior team that's sitting there like this when I walked in. Yep. I mean, they heard I was a psychologist, and, people were looking at me like, it was like, we're not talking about anything to this woman. Anyway, it took a little time, but I used everything I knew about how I worked with families. It's systems work. You're not working with an individual, you're working with a collective. And I taught them, my words, I hope this isn't offensive, but how to play nice in the sandbox, and it worked. And it was one of those, he told a friend who told a friend who told a friend. And all of a sudden I looked around and I thought, this is where I want to be. And part of it was because I had grown up in a fairly lucrative family business where my father and his two brothers worked together, and they were fiscally sound, but emotionally bankrupt. I mean, they fought all the time. So I didn't want anything with work, with business, Right. But once I got in there, I thought, oh my God, this is powerful stuff. And from there, I started to create everything I needed to create. I think we're moving into a new, I'm thinking about what needs to be created now. And I'm maybe a third of the way there. I don't have all the answers yet, but I know things are going to be different. As I said, it's going to be business as unusual.
No, I think it's definitely going to be different. And that's what I'm so fascinated by, is what does that mean and what does it look like? I just don't know how we know, right? And I think people are rethinking their entire way that they do business, and I think that's going to be fascinating over the next couple of years to see what comes out of it. I mean, business was so disrupted after 2008, and I mean, you look at what
right.
Airbnb came into existence, and Uber, and all these other types of businesses. So this is bound to change our landscape again, right?
Well, I'm hoping that the changes are about, again, we talk about inner work. When I worked with families, it was very interesting. Early on, I would have parents drop their teenage kids off and say, we'll be back. We're going out. We'll come back in an hour, pick them up. And I go, excuse me, you're part of this equation. You're not going to, I'm not their parent. You are. And eventually I would have to take the kids and say, go into the waiting room and go read a book or do your homework or watch the television that was out there. And I'd say, the parents, I need you. And that's the same thing now with leadership. As leaders, we really do signify that next level up. And we really have to be more aware of ourselves, aware of our inner world. There's more of that. It's been going on, but it's been going on this looking internally for maybe the last 10 years more than I've seen.
Yeah.
But now with people at home, I think I'm getting more and more calls about people who are saying, not help my business as much as help me figure out how to help my business. It's a very
Right.
different dynamic.
I know, absolutely. And I was going to finish a second ago by saying I think the other revolution is that our employees and our teams and our people are going to expect that from leaders now, right? They're going to expect that person is better with empathy, better at being open, more genuine, more. I remember being trained in business that you had when I was becoming a manager. That there's got to be this distance, right? You've got to keep this professional distance between
Right.
you and your people, and that never really intuitively made sense to me. It didn't feel right. But I think even more so today, if people don't know you and they don't understand you and understand what drives you as a person, then it's going to be harder for them to follow you as a leader. That's just my 2 cents, but.
Well, I think that's it. And it's interesting because I'm working with one of the companies I'm working with it's still a startup. It's about 5 years old. Mm-hmm. And the president, founder, CEO, whatever he wants to be called at the moment, is 31 years old. So he's a bona fide millennial. And when he called, he said, I need help with my people. And I said, hello. This was before the pandemic started. I said, you need to find out what's going on inside you. And I've been watching him and mentoring him through this time. And he really got the responsibility for the people that he works with. He really got it. So he has a Zoom meeting every morning to check in. And it's interesting because in checking in, we call it getting current. And the way we start all of our meetings and have trained and taught everybody we work with is when you come into a room, everybody's busy. I mean, now you're not driving so much anymore, but you still have all this stuff at home and kids hanging out and saying, why are you getting on that call? I need you to help me with this. And, somebody else saying you didn't get breakfast or lunch or dinner or whatever. So getting current is a time where you take a deep breath and you're quiet for 60 seconds. Now that's 1 minute. As far as I know, 60 seconds equals 1 minute out of a day, right?
Right.
So there's silence. Everybody's on Zoom, but it's totally silent. There's no music. There's just quiet. And then people start to say where they are right then, getting current. And when people learn how to do this, it's pretty quick. You're not doing run-on sentences and you're not writing a book for your life. You're simply saying something like, my kid woke up this morning and he had a headache and I was so frustrated and I had to get on the call and I'm annoyed. Or I just found out that my mother living in, Omaha is not doing well and I'm worried about it. There's no crosstalk. They're simply saying, and it's a way of getting out the human part. It takes, people would resist this when I would first teach it, but it's the kind of thing, I don't want to take time to change my little bell there. Sorry about that. But it's the kind of thing that starts to create the humanization. And once you do that, once you get these back thoughts of your frustration or your angst out, you can be more present in the meeting, in the moment. And you begin to see people relax a little bit, and relax, maybe not be they're intended to be there with each. The intention is different because they feel heard. So when I taught this guy this, he said, "Oh, it's going to take too long. It's going to take I said, just do it, because there's so much going on. And the group, the senior leadership team that he works with has become much more cohesive. And if somebody's really having a serious problem, then you take it offline. You're not there. One of the things that I've taught for years is work is not a rehab facility.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. But if people are having problems, you have to figure it out. And everybody's sort of in their own variation of overwhelm or even underwhelmed. They're bored and, they want to get out and they can't. So it's changing the rhythm. But I suggest to anybody who's listening here to start with getting current. And I'll tell you one really quick story about this. We did this once, and it was a sales team. And we had a retreat center in the East Coast at the time, and we're in the room. There are about 30 people in the room, and we're in a circle. And I had taught them how to do getting current. And one guy said, "This is the biggest waste of time I've ever seen." And I said, "It's 1 minute. It's 60 seconds of quiet, and then it's a sentence or two from people." And he got up and he left. He walked out of the room. And I figured, okay, if it's too much for him, he's too armored. Anyway, He came back later and he was fine for the rest of the meeting. But I got a call. It was a little bit sad, but 2 weeks later saying he had a heart attack and he hadn't been well. Anyway, as he got better, he called me. He said, "Remember that thing about getting current, Sylvia?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can we talk about that?" He said, "I want to do it at home now, and I want to do it with my team." He said, "I'm beginning to see that I was stuffing everything and trying to be, machismo and all of that." And he said it didn't work. So getting current makes a difference. I hope that helps somebody.
And I think that's what people are trying to do now, right? They're trying some variant of that, and with the Zoom calls and with the daily stuff. I think that people realize that you've got to get, I know some of the teams that I'm working with are really trying to start their meetings with some of that type of real stuff, like, real life, real world, what you're thinking and what you're feeling right now, to sort of get that off the table. And I don't know if it's intended to bring people present, but I know I think people are doing it to get things off their chests. And I think you're absolutely right. I've seen it in some of my own meetings. It does help people then come back once they've said their piece, right? It does let them focus. That's a brilliant point. That's a great way to maybe help people talk through their stuff and then be present for whatever it is you've got to deal with in the business.
Absolutely. So
yeah. What are the keys? I mean, you wrote "Don't Bring It to Work." I think that it was a great book. Can you talk about some of the common behaviors in the office and the steps that we can take to fix these behaviors?
Well, we're back to inner work for everybody, but it's very interesting. So let me paint this picture. As kids, our original organization is the family.
Right.
And then we grow up and we go into our present organization. Now, this is where it started to connect for me. The organization we go into is not that different than the family. We have bosses like parents. We have coworkers like siblings. We have salaries like allowances. And we even have timeouts called performance improvement plans.
Yep.
So what we learned when we were kids on how to handle especially conflict or being appreciated, it shows up at work. And here's what I found is we can be fine and good and kind and everything if it's an easy day flowing along. But when stress hits the hot button, like now, we tend to revert back to the patterns that we learned as kids. And that's where the deep work is. It's transforming them. So right now what I'm working on is a book on stress. And I don't know, I have decided that there is this place that we'll get to called the safe stress zone. We have to practice safe stress. Some people think it's corny. I kind of like it. Thank you for laughing.
I like it.
So the idea is, as I watch people, and let me talk about this for a second with conflict or stress, we fall on one side of the fence or the other. Either we fall on the side where we scream it out, or we fall on the side where we stuff it down. And we learned that as kids. We learned either it was safe to express yourself. And in some families, we became, here's Sylvia, the drama queen, we became a little too loud. Or
Right.
we grew up where you didn't say it and you shut it down. So right now we're learning. We need to know how to, when stress is high, to transform. Being on either side of that fence doesn't work. We want to be in the middle zone, the safe stress zone, where we can say, I'm really feeling stressed about it. And I'd love to walk out of this room right now, but I won't, because we have to get this done. And again, it's just being able to express that makes a difference for people. So, and I had to learn this the hard way, because I did grow up I have an older brother who was king of the hill, and he would say, tomorrow's Thursday. And my parents would say, oh my God, that's brilliant. And then cute little Sylvia would say, well, tomorrow's Thursday. And they go, isn't that cute? So the only way I got attention was to have a hissy fit. And I became a queen of hissy fits. And so the drama queen went to work with me. And if I got upset, I figured the only way to get hurt is to get louder, to pound my fists or roll my eyes or do whatever the heck I did. And it didn't work. So I had to learn to move in to that safe stress zone. And the people who stuff it down were the ones who were sadly, getting sick, holding it in. You can't hold it in. So it's learning how to talk about it, which I think is very, very important in these days.
Is it sort of your responsibility as a manager or leader to help your team do that? Or, I mean, how do you implement that in a workplace, I guess?
Well, the answer is yes. It is part of the package to be able to do that. And that's why I'm saying leaders need to do inner work, so that when they're talking to somebody and they see somebody who you can tell they want to say it, but they've learned, keep it quiet. Mm-hmm. That's when you ask these questions. And I'm going to give you one of my best takeaways from the whole thing for today, which I learned years ago, is if somebody is saying, I'm really upset with the way Jane and Joe did this project. I mean, we're all on Zoom now, so you can, be in the room together. And they say, but, I'll get it handled. But you can feel they're still upset. You say, tell me more. Those are my 3 magic words. I'm not sure where the heck it goes. I think in neuropsychology, they probably have this answered. I haven't found it anywhere. But somewhere, tell me more opens a door in our brain. And people will always say a next phase of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then you can respond. And you can do 1 or 2. You can't do a half a dozen tell me mores. It gets a little out of hand. 1 or 2 tell me mores will work. So, okay. But as leaders, we need to learn to read our people better. They're not products. They're not, cups on the table. They're still live human beings. And I think sometimes we forget it when we have to get the work done.
I was, several months ago, I was working or talking to a CEO and working with him a little bit on some things. And one of the things I thought was brilliant about what he did was and he had a couple hundred people in his organization, and every year he goes to lunch or takes a walk or spends about an hour with each employee.
Wow.
And I found I just found that to be really brilliant. No matter, and he sets the conditions very clearly with his managers that, look, I'm not trying to undermine you. I'm not trying to, get dirt on you. I'm simply going to lunch with. I want to spend time with everybody in the organization because I want to know them as people. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what's going on in the organization. And I found that to be brilliant, but I also, coming from what you're saying is, I bet that really does help him when there is conflict, and when he does see someone that doesn't seem right or doesn't seem happy or is having an issue with another person. I bet it helps them recognize that maybe.
Well, it's interesting. It used to be, when you're saying that, if you would be told, would you go to lunch with me alone? in here it meant, I think I'm going to be fired.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, or whoops, what did I do wrong? So what he's doing, whoever he is, give him a high five from me, because I mean, that's a lot of work to take everybody out one-on-one and listen. And a lot of the CEOs and the senior VPs I've worked with over the years have said, well, I'm not a psychologist. I don't need to know this. To which I say, why not? I mean, we're dealing with human beings. And this is not therapy. So you're not dealing with somebody who's massively depressed and ready to jump off a roof, although that can happen too. And we have to then refer them to the right place. But there's a human connection. I have found during this time that people are kinder. I have found, I don't know about you, people seem kinder to each other. They're saying, with really asking, so how are you doing? And they really want to hear the answer,
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's how are you doing? And then the F word, it's how are you feeling?
Yeah. Ooh,
I was in
that feeling.
I had to tell you this. I was in a meeting once, and it was an offsite, and it was getting a little bit tense. And at one of the breaks, the director of the group called me over, and he said, "Stop using the F word." Well, I can get pretty good with my language, but I know where to use it. And I went, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Sylvia, you keep asking me how I feel." He said, "I have no idea how I feel. I only know what I think." So I said, "Okay, I promise I won't do it again." So we go back in the meeting. I asked the same questions that I would have said using, quote, the F word. And I'd say, "Well, tell me what you think." And I'd get the answers I wanted. So, it's again, this is the other piece, is meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. We have to find a way of meeting them and then finding the language that will encourage them, rather than we being the ones that only have to be listened to.
Right. That's great advice. Thank you so much for being on the show. You were talking about before we came on that you've got a class that you wanted to tell everybody about.
Yeah, it's called Stress Busters. And it's funny because I was writing a book about workplace relationships, the kind of next level to don't bring it to work. And I asked a couple of groups, what do you want to really talk about now? And all I got was stress release, stress release, stress release. This was March, I guess, when it started. So I pivoted, and I'm now working. So it's called Stress Busters. And it's really about, I created a thing called the Stress Flex system. I like to create sort of fancy things. But the whole idea is that we have to develop our emotional core just like we have to develop our physical core. Pilates has really been great in teaching us about getting the core strong. We have to get our emotional core strong. So I've created this online program called Stress Busters, and it's really about the emotions that need to be looked at. And everybody has a different spin on what emotions means and what they should be looking at. So I'm taking them through this process, and it's been for me even interesting. I'll just tell you the one thing I learned. You know what eustress is?
I have no idea.
Well, neither did I. So it's eustress, eustress, not eustress, and it's really the healthy stress that we have to really get in our nervous system and then look at it. So when the acute stress or the chronic stress starts to come on, we can really learn how to deal with it. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, that sounds fascinating. Please put a link into that work, or whatever. Please send me that link so we can put it in the feed so that people can take a look and get in touch. Dr. Lafair is the author of Don't Bring It to Work. And so please check that book out. I think it's very, very relevant to probably what you're facing in your business today. And Dr. Lafair, thank you for being on the program.
Oh, thank you. Been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us today here on the Power Lunch. We have got another program coming up shortly. I've got Derek Stone on the afternoon program today. We're going to talk about his journey into forgiveness and transformation, which is going to be fascinating with his background. And anyway, we'll see you here in a few minutes, and we'll have a good day. If you don't join us for that second show, have a good day and stay safe.